And good afternoon. This is a Familiar Company podcast. Today we had Whyking on to talk about some Norse mythology and a little bit of his family history. I really hope you guys enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. It was very interesting. I had no idea how deep the mythology goes, and it was a privilege to hear it from someone so close to it all. So without further ado, let's get started. So here today with us is Whyking. How you doing today, bud?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Just chilling, and life is good.
So do you want to give us a little bit of backstory on who you are and how you learned about Norse mythology?
So yeah, I'm a native Icelandic. I'm sorry. I'm a native Icelandic Norse pagan. I've been a part of it since I was a kid, and so I speak the language, and I've been raised in it. But I was raised in on my father's side in Norse, and on my mother's side in Christian sort of mythology, or
Right.
the theology.
So did they get along well with that dynamic?
Nah, they split up later on. But I always had that dichotomy. Well, it's just what it is. And, But having both was very useful, as you know, when you know more than one language, you can reflect on both. See, you know, both the good parts and the defects of either language.
Right. So you probably looked at like interpretations in a lens that they probably weren't able to.
Yeah. So I got the good, bad, and the ugly of both, I would say.
Yeah. I really do like symbolism, especially because it's one of those things that, like, it's like art, you know, it's almost subjective how it can be interpreted. But oftentimes an artist does have a true intent, right? But it's up to the people that view it, how they interpret it, right?
Indeed. So my first memory is finding this very artsy book that explains all the Norse mythos. And I love that book. And it was in Icelandic, and with all the poetry, and there's a lot of poetic structure to the Norse mythos. And there's also oral stories that we just tell each other. And it's very hard to translate. If you ever look at the Norse mythos and translations, you usually have 5 editions that are saying circa about the same thing, but never exactly the same thing, because of the depth of how it is composed. And that is also what is lost often when speaking about Norse mythos in English, is that depth is often lost. But it is very similar to people how they look at Hebrew. You know, Hebrew into Greek, Greek into Aramaic, or vice versa, and then finally to English.
Yeah, there's all kind of wild interpretations. I've heard anything from it's a literal story to it's actually a story of how the stars and the seasons work. You know, I've heard a lot of interpretations, so it does blow my mind. You know, and like I'm curious to like, to the best of your ability, like what mythological story like touched your heart the most in this sense that, you know, hasn't been quite conveyed the right way to, you know, like the Americanized like, you know, we watch like Thor and the Marvel, or like, you know, the Kratos becoming the God of War in that series, and we have very few authentic interpretations.
Yeah. And so I learned the Norse mythos from my father, and my father learned from my great-grandfather. my great uncle is the man who did the Sorcerer's Creed, which has the magical runes, the Yggdrasil, and all the Norse, apparently Vikings runes, but they're not Viking, they're synchronistic. But yes, maybe I'll start at the beginning, or sort of the beginning.
Wherever you like.
So to view the whole thing, you have to look at how Norse mythos comes from. It comes from the plains of Ukraine, even older maybe, like maybe the Ice Age, because it is not a holistic story. It is, as the thought of humanity has developed, there's always more and more added. And so there's clear, prehistoric parts of the Norse mythos, especially the cosmology. But to enter the world of Norse, you have to look at Odin and Yggdrasil. And now you have to then understand Odin. Or Odin or Wotan, it differs how the pronunciation. Odin is the mad god. He has many names and many shapes. He can change his hammer. Hammer is how your body is composed, the material composition.
Mm-hmm.
He is also the god of death. He is the one responsible to gift you the gift of death. Is the Grim Reaper sort of figure. So he has a role as a death god. So the whole Norse mythos, from a Christian point of view, is a chaos god pantheon, essentially.
Right, but if I'm correct, y'all don't view evil the same way, right?
No, so evil is a different thing.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different approach. So the whole is more holistic. Christianity is more dualistic, arguably.
Yeah.
Though there's mysticism or declinations, but yeah.
But the modern understanding, I would agree, is transmuted into something very different. But you said you were talking about Yggdrasil. I can't pronounce it properly, but the Tree of Life is how I know it.
Yeah. Yeah, Tree of Life. This is actually from perhaps later medieval era or early Dark Ages. Addition, especially the Nine Realms, and then it has an akin to Kabbalah. But what is interesting is Yggdrasil is a compound of two words, Ukur or Igr, which is Iglich, which means ugly, and Drasil is something you drag around like a heavy weight, a burden that you just sort of have to, like imagine 60 kilos or 120 pounds that you gotta carry all day. It's something you don't want to move, but you have to.
Right.
That's what Drasil means. And so the whole ride that Odin makes through the whole thing is the ugly ride, or the suffering of heavy weight.
Whoa. And so we're still talking about the Tree of Life? That blows my mind from what I thought it was. So here goes one of those things that, like, interpretation is completely kind of lost in translation. That blows my mind. It took a second to sink in, but now I understand. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
There's a famous one where Odin hangs in a tree for 9 nights and 9 days. Yeah. That poem talks about himself as the reader is Odin. It is actually the poem is actually trying to invoke archetype or the god in the person that is reading it.
Whoa, so it's like a spell almost, or like it,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a possession
it's
spell,
essentially.
you could say, like with leniency.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
interesting.
It is essentially calling upon the god.
Wow, I've never heard of this
Um,
interpretation before. This blows my mind, but I do believe in summoning spirits and aiding of need and whatnot. And
yeah,
so, like, I can totally see how, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Like, because we pray all
yeah.
the time. We always pray for beings to come down and help us, and so it perfectly makes sense that this would be some kind of spell, right?
Hmm.
Ah,
And
that's beautiful.
this is actually this touches on Seidr. Seidr is a specific Germanic type, or Proto-Celtic and Proto-Germanic type of, I guess, magic. And to the word Seidra, which is a verb of Seidr, is conjuring. It is also meaning herding, and this is why this is a dark path. All the gods in this are dark gods because they have depth. And the reason someone takes on this path is because they are hurting. Everyone's in this thing has like a spirit wound or trauma, and the entire system, the Norse mythos system to practice, essentially is about that hurt.
Mm.
And it's very profound, because the same direction, up is down, and down and up are the same direction.
Right.
And so is also meaning and meaningless. Like zero and an infinity is the same direction.
Yeah. There is no beginning or ending. We compartmentalize things within our understanding of the world, but that's just not what reality really is.
Yeah. And then when you understand that and you read about Odin, so there's a lot of stories about Odin when he's starting out, and there's like ancient stories that like how Odin got sacrificed his eye in the Mimir's where Mimir guards the wisdom and knowledge. However, Mimir means memory or remembrance, and that's the older type of the story. And because later on he gets ravens that are Hugin and Munin, which is the mind and remembrance. So those two things are, so the raven are a later addition, but the Mimir story is older, because that's where Odin is young as a god.
That's some crazy symbolism. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like,
and so go ahead.
Like, the words have been lost. Like, I because I haven't. Yeah, I've always just seen the stereotypical depictions like just play out, but like the labels behind the characters mean so much more.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating.
So when Odin has the ravens, the knowledge of Mimir, when he has the knowledge of the runes, when he has conquered the wolves, which is Geri and Freki, and Geri is the action, Freki is this this I would say masculine sort of, this is mine and this shall be mine concept. It doesn't exist in English, so it's hard to translate. And then, with his spear in Gungnir, which means that, that spear makes its foe run away. And then it's described as the lowest, the high, and the highest. So you got the Trinity there. And then he is described as the equally as bad as he's good. That's the short version of Odin.
Wow.
Of course, there's tons of lore to understand.
Yeah,
Like,
but
I'm giving you
that adds some
short
deeper
version.
layers, though. It does, because I
Yeah.
have very simple understanding. So anywhere you take me, I'm ready. Like, I haven't heard about this before. I've only seen, like, small things from, like, movies, and you know what I mean? Like, not what it really is. Small Easter eggs, you could say, throughout what I've probably consumed.
So essentially, Odin is sort of this guardian figure that watches Yggdrasil, and when you consider one point I want to come across is Middle Earth, where our plane of existence, and to convey this thought, it's very similar to the Hermetic principle, above and so below as above. So where are we then? We're in the middle.
Right.
We are exact smack dab in the middle. That's why the earthly kingdom is the Middle Earth.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because that's what's below us. We walk on soil, and that makes perfect sense.
And so next into the cosmology, like I said, Odin is the god of death. He chooses to give you the gift of death. You cannot die unless he has to give you the gift of death. And the one who keeps you is Hel. She is the daughter of Loki and Angurbodda. Angurbodda is her name is so Angst is anger, and Bodha is the deliverer or messenger. So her name meaning messenger of angst. Anyway, Hel has brothers Sleipnir and Jormungandr, which is the same as Ouroboros, the serpent that goes around the earth.
Right. That one I'm familiar with in a sense. I have a weird interpretation of it, but I want to hear yours first.
Jormungandr is just the great wild serpent. My interpretation of it is that it is the it's so many ways you can take it. Like that's a rebirth, a constant cycle. Because the running theme, like if we talk about the Destiny, for example, the common theme with the entire cosmology is that it's a reoccurring thing. It goes in cycles. So in my mind, it's not that it's more like a great beast that is like a evil or anything in the Christian sense.
Right.
But it's just like a force.
Yep. That's pretty much what I've interpreted too. So that makes sense. Yeah. It definitely is kind of, I call it samsara, the cycle of life, being stuck within the cycle and trying to transcend it, I like how, and I do like particularly how it's represented by a snake eating its own tail, is because it's a vicious cycle, We're constantly consuming ourselves without realizing it, and there's a profound sense once you realize that, stop eating your own tail as well. Like there's some aspects, I think, that what you're saying about it being a force of nature really keeps it in tune, like in that we have this responsibility with consciousness to be in flow, but it's complicated. I'm really fascinated.
Oh, I almost forgot. And then there's a key component character in this. One of the brethren is Fenrist, the great wolf. In short, he represents the chaos that keeps growing. So once you set order to the world, you have this chaos that you sort of, it's fun to play with, but eventually it gets too big, so you have to shut it down. The problem with that, if you shut down the chaos, it will only grow and grow and grow until it's set loose. There's a moral to that story that we can maybe touch on, but I want to go into the astounding, I think, what I've discovered recently with the cosmology of Norse mythos. And that is the concept of the void. Gylfa, in Gylfaginning, or the Fooling of Gylfa, which is a poetry in a book about where Odin tells the story of the world. And then the first in that poem is Gab var okkar ginnunga gab. That translates, in the beginning, we were all born of the gaping void. That's the general translation. However, I think there's a double entry there, because ginna means to fool, and unga means like you're born of the thing. So we are born of the illusion that is a gaping void. That is the true meaning of that word. And then I ask, fooling of who? And then you look at Hindu religion, and that's exactly Maya. So we're looking at a concept as probably as, old pre-Ice Age, in my opinion.
I'm right there with you, honestly. I definitely believe that.
I honestly,
because it lines up with a lot of what I've studied too about the nature of existence and our relationship to it.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
that's
so
profound.
And so, Ginnungagap is the first thing that was when silence, absolute silence, nothing was. And through the opposing of two things, the frost world, Muspel, and Muspel was the fire, sorry, and Niflheim was the frost. And from these two opposing things, the first being came into being, which is Öðumla, which is the primordial cow, and the second being was Ymir, the screamer, and he sucked the cow's teeth for sustenance. So now you have the holy cow thing coming in very strong, and this is from the same roots as the Hindus. They reverence to cows and Minoan culture, etc. And so from Ymir, everything is born. Ymir represents vibration, and from there are other titans and other, creatures that come forth until Odin and his brothers, Vile and Vie, kill Ymir and then create the universe.
Like, I have read a little bit about it, but it's so crazy to think about. Where does this symbolism play in right about here? Is there something you would say is kind of lost there?
Well, it's open. It's a mystery for reasons. So it's essentially, in the beginning there was nothing, but inside the void, there became one. Well, the something, consciousness, vibration, and it split into maybe 20, 30 things, and those 30 things split even further. And those many started to hack away at the first one until the first one was to fuse into many. And that's simply it. Once it was diffused, it wanted to be whatever it was, to be again in order. And then this cycle began. Order, chaos, order, chaos.
Right.
Silence and screeching, So it became, the opposites became one while being separate. This entanglement that we call existence came to being from that point.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Um,
So,
that's why I had to start with Odin and explaining who he is, and then go into the cosmology,
right.
and from there we can explore like particular aspects of it, because there's I think about 30 deities in total.
Yeah, what? So, which brother came first? I don't. Wait, Thor and Loki, were they the firstborn too? Or.
So
Because that's what I've always thought.
Thor is born first, definitely. Loki is either Odin's brother, half like adopted brother, or half brother, depending on the sources, or the half brother of Thor. There is a confusion on this because in Ragnarok, when the world tree dies, the ones who take the mantle are the sons of Thor, and so the sons of Thor take, one of them becomes the new Odin, and one becomes Thor, and then assuming they will adopt a Jotun from the Frost Giants or Jotun as to become the next Loki, and then the whole thing starts again.
What was their relationship to their father? Didn't they like constantly have a strife with their father?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely. The father isn't much talked about, but yeah, definitely is. So this comes from the early aspects of Norse mythos, is that it was a simply Ingarður, which means the inside city, and Utgarður, the outside. So if you were outside the tribe, you would be, outside the tribe. That's the, definition. So everything that wasn't in Asgard or in the first one's garden. So Isid, I should say, their true name is the first ones. And so if you were not in the tribe, you were out the tribe and therefore against the tribe. So yeah, naturally all frost giants, even though technically Odin is also a frost giant, but just a particular tribe of frost giants, yeah, they're not a part of us. So there's a division, and this is more like older type, rather than a recent thought.
That's
So
a lot.
in general,
That's a lot to soak up.
yeah, sorry, yeah. So yeah, they adapted someone foreign, but they are still at war with the tribes that are outside. And there's a famous story where another figure, Loki, with the same name, but not the same Loki as we refer as Isid. Utgarda Loki steals the hammer of Thor and Meingjörð, his belt that gives his incredible strength. And there's this whole comedy where Thor has to wear a dress, and Loki, from the Isid side, has to, trickster his way to get Mjolnir back and Meingjörð. And Thor, being this robust dude, is posing as Freya, the fertility goddess, and it's a whole comedy thing. It's really fun. But that figure is as Utgarda Loki, as the outsider, outside the plains in Jotunheim. So
I wonder
there's
how
definitely
old these stories go back. Like, so you said that a lot of them are oral traditions. So, like,
yeah.
that's what's really fascinating too, is because that comes from a deep bond of like community. So, what would you say are some things that you're suspicious of in these stories that have kind of gotten lost in that telephone game?
One of them is the Ginnungagap, which I just told you about.
Right.
That is one of the lost. There's also that in one of the poems, I don't know if they have been written down. I think they've been written down. But I think there's the 11th verse in Völuspá, which is an oracle telling the past and the future, now and the future. is that all of the gods are fake essentially. They are false idols. There are, in that sense, that they're Gin-Haluk, again the same word in Gin-Gagap, that they are holy because we worship them. Because by worshiping them, we give them power. And so, if people stop worshiping them, they lose power. And this thing has a word, Mayin. And Mayin means possibility. And so the thing about Odin and Thor, they gain power from something called Mayin also. Every living thing has it. It is what it means, I think, and this is just personal and from my sect, essentially, or line, is that it means Lord of Possibilities. And that's where all power comes from, is the source. So these are just faces or masks or archetypes. It's not the real thing.
Right, yeah. That's what I get from a lot of these tales and whatnot, but some of them are so powerful, you wonder, like, are they really up there stomping around? But
so yes, they are, because we believe in them and give them form.
Right.
As much as vice versa. It's a relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely believe that too. I use, ritual means to like keep like my sanity and peace of mind and feel like secure, and like I've definitely seen a lot of results for sure. So I can attest to there's a great power when one gains any form of like faith,
Indeed. And so when people sometimes ask me, what do you believe in? I just say me, and they don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a clue. I wouldn't have had a clue until today. That's powerful though.
But it's essentially Lord of Possibilities. It is it's a being that is defined sometimes in one of the poems, Reyin Ovan, or the kings above. So even the gods themselves, the Norse gods, are aware that they're on the bottom of the totem pole. Essentially, they're not the highest ones, but also they try to convey in the stories that those that are highest are the shortest from the being the lowest, and round it goes. Essentially,
right.
That
it's never
that
ending.
the gods themselves cannot escape the word or urlug, which are word is essentially the destiny. Urlug and word and urlug are the destiny. And the gods are bound by these laws of the universe.
Yeah, so even they're obliged.
And so we have to then maybe talk about the three witches of destiny. Because when I'm talking about this, like, is there free will in this model? It seems like all doom and gloom, and it's just like, holy shit. Well, it's not like that. There is like a hope at the end of the tunnel, sort of way. And this is the key point. So the oldest is Urdur, which means to bury. She's the oldest of the crone. And then there's a woman that is just, in their 20s, I suppose, or 30s. That is Verdandi, which is the present. And Skuld, which is the youngest. And she is the future. And so they weave, essentially, each weave their names into the web tapestry of destiny. And together they are the word, or wird, what is to become of everything and everyone. And so everyone has a role in this tapestry. And to put this into perspective, the Norse don't view time as linear, but a totality, a unity field, the whole carpet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Essentially, the many worlds theory, that's like a rabbit hole in its own sense. from this perspective, it fits together. Anyway, so their role is to do that tapestry, but also to take the waters. So one of the roots of Yggdrasil goes into their Urðabrunn, in the well, and the well or the cave where they dwell. And their role is to take the waters that we, create essentially when we are living our lives. We create the fuel for the tree of life, and they use that water to feed the tree, and then the tree drops more into the well through the leaves. So there's this cycle.
Whoa, that's depicting the process of how water is transferred through us to the trees and then to the oxygen and the carbon dioxide in the air, right? And there's this whole symbiotic relationship behind us and the trees. Yeah. And here's a mythology telling it in a sense, in symbolism, long before the science was there. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And so you have to have the concept of forlög, or pre-destiny, that you cannot change your parents. You cannot change the country you're born in. You cannot change what you did yesterday. And, the past has an effect on the now and future. But you can always, turn around. If you have a crossroads, you can always turn around. Every moment is a crossroad. And that is your destiny. Örlög. So there is free will. And this is actually a very deep, philosophical, solution to destiny, essentially, free will. Then basically we're stuck in a machine, but we still have limited choice. Without limitations, we're not endless. But within that limited system, we are endless. So it's like, whoa.
Yeah, I feel like there's some similarities here in Gnostic text.
Yeah, you're right. The Gnostic texts, are similar with how the universe began. There's so many similarities.
Yeah, the Gnostics are also a bit more aggressive too, and I think there's been a cleansing, a desensitization process for people very slowly. I have my own worries about that, but some would say it's a part of evolution. I just don't know. But I also see people also waking up in other ways, How do you think the age of Aquarius ties into all of this?
I don't know. I've heard the notion that age of Aquarius. So we
the apocalypse is how it pops up in the Bible, a sense.
Yeah,
and the age of winter, right? I think is how it's depicted in Norse mythology.
Yeah, Fimbulvetur, which is a 5-year winter, where the wolves of Fenrist and Garmr come out, essentially need everything. I don't know. So what I understand with the Age of Aquarius is that it's supposed to be keeping knowledge, and so far the Norse mythos, or sagas and oral tradition and the poetry, that it has survived so far. So as knowledge, keeping that knowledge is relatively resilient so far. I believe it will continue because it speaks to people. As apocalypse, well, it happens in a cycle, and is it now, tomorrow? I don't know. Who cares though? It will happen at some point. I believe that humanity has gone through several, these cataclysmic events.
Yeah. Hey man, the winters have been getting longer.
Yeah.
And colder. But I'm in line with you there on that part of it's a cycle for sure. I believe it's there's going to be this really bitter part where we're probably all going to get broken down as a collective. And, eventually we'll rise from that and become something else, a bit stronger. It is a part of life, so I definitely agree. And I think I mentioned earlier, the sensitization, I think they want us to be scared. It's pretty obvious. Like, there's been a scrubbing and cleaning of everything we consume on a daily basis, and it seems like it goes a lot further back than we're willing to admit, because it gets too personal because of what we're raised on and stuff. And I think, like, a lot of what you've told me and what I've been able to decipher myself from my own personal perspective of a Christian, and like, you know, I know my Bible for a good bit, you know, and I can tell you, like, there's a lot of similarities, especially when you include a lot of Gnostic texts that I would say they should be a part of it, but that's a debate in itself. But there's all these similarities, and it all ties up very nicely. And I think there's a lot that's been, you know, sanitized and spoon-fed to people and cherry-picked. But we're so easily willing to throw symbolism out the window. And I can appreciate how pretty much your culture has been able to sustain symbolism, because somebody had to share this with you. And, you know, if correct, like your uncles and whatnot helped you. You know, that's something we really don't have here. Our religion gets lost in telephone games so bad. It's crazy. We have all kinds of churches set up that are like at battle with theology theory with each other, you know. So it's nice to see somebody be able to like see symbolism in their religion in a very profound way and be able to share it, you know, because you get too many people of like a Christian faith or Baptist or, you know, Jewish in a room, and oh my Lord, you know, they really can't agree with one another when it comes down to it. And I think it's very interesting how your culture has been able to keep most of it together, you know, and share profound truths with one another.
Yeah, what I'm sharing with you is only the fragments that survive. Let's be real. Christianity, some parts of Christianity has tried to kill it very vehemently.
Right.
But on the other side, there were Christian bishops that protected it. So it's from both sides of the coin. So I can't be mad at the Christians for it, because they saved it. But the other half, you know, want to destroy it, you know. But the fundamental core, as you were saying, it is about the shared story. And that shared story will never change or leave. You cannot kill it.
Right.
And so it is about who controls that shared story. That is the role of the shaman, to be essentially share the story, to be light, let the light shine through him and share the story.
Right.
However, the one who can share the story can also capitalize on the story and become powerful. And that's, in some circles, a wizard or this emperor, if we go into Star Wars, that capitalizes on the knowledge. And that's where the hero's journey, you know, tropes come in, etc., etc. And that's why also we are so hungry for the hero's journey stories in our culture. We need it. We recognize it when we see it, but not so much that, you know, we actualize, but we know, you know, deep within our subconscious, this is a thing. This is the thing I need, and that's why we keep entertaining ourselves with it instead of becoming or be. That's entirely different.
Yeah. The illusion. Wow. Yeah, this has been amazing, man. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Glad I can share a little bit. There's more. There's so much material, but yeah.
I mean, you can keep going if you like. I'm here to listen all night, as long as you want to go, man.
All right. Yeah. So maybe I'll go a little bit in personal detail.
Sure.
Well, I was talking about Hel, the goddess of death.
Right.
And it's a cold place where she lives, and she's described either as this old woman that is hell blue, or, you know, hell blow, which correlates how bodies decompose. In our modern day, we don't see bodies that much and how they decompose, but in the olden days, we would be with the bodies like 2-3 weeks. So my introduction into this whole thing was when I was 4. I was visited like when I was going to bed, and there was summer. I remember, yeah, like it was definitely summer. And in the night, I was visited by this old woman that was decaying and just blue and had necrotic flesh and all that jazz.
Jesus. Oh my
And
God.
I believe today that that's hell.
I would
Straight
too.
up. There's a thing called Fylgja, which is in the lore that it's a spirit that follows you. It can be an ancestor, it can be anything really. Spirit animal, and goes under that category. But I definitely I think today that is hell, and I got scared shitless. And according to my mom, my parents had split. That the room was cold, and it's important because it was summer, and it felt like winter in the room.
Mm.
She disappeared as my mother, came in when I was
Yeah.
screaming in lungs, and that was definitely the thing that always bugged me. And from then, and as a kid, I saw these things, and etc. etc. And that's why I went further than Christianity. Also, I had the access, and then so in the Norse or Ausatro, we're not allowed to sort of preach, essentially this or that, unless someone wants to hear. Then we talk about it. And that is sort of my genesis to research and look into these things.
Mm.
Because when you see like a thing like that, you can't not but divulge and just like what happened. And so
Yeah.
she visited me also when I was 11 or 12 years old. So I've seen her twice.
What do you think it represents? Do you think it's something very real, or do you think it might be something from within?
Good question. Well, so what is the difference between the inner world and outer world? You can possibly divide the inner world as being their reality, which are state of consciousness right now, the inner world, and the divine, which is sort of this higher up. And I think the divine can go down either in these two. In these both cases, the first case I was awake and that was real. So I saw her as a kid, walk in and just stand there.
That's a quite bit more startling.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so I want to address this a little bit. I didn't know about death, the concept of death. I didn't know how people are made, like bones, sinew, all that jazz.
Yeah.
But I saw it then, like how a person is composed of, the skull, etc. And
Right.
she looked at like she'd been drowned in water, bloated, etc. Just like straight out of a horror movie. The second time, that was definitely a dream. What is important, I think, about Hel, she is a keeper of the dead. Meaning, she doesn't claim you. She's not a Grim Reaper. Odin is the Grim Reaper. He gives death. She is sort of this great mother. She keeps the dead in her womb, essentially. She's an old earth goddess, essentially.
Right.
You can see this in Greek, I believe. But it's definitely on me.
Like being confronted with death, that early on, I'm sure it gave you a sense of something profound that most people don't understand, And death is like we've been kind of going over here about time and etc. But these are the lines we as humans have drawn in the lines. On the other side, they mean very different things. And it's just a part of the cycles. So these archetypes portray to us in mysterious ways, I personally think that they're all shapeshifters. they're always constantly shape-shifting depending on the culture around them and whatever's going to resonate the most with those people's, But that's just personally.
Yeah.
I think
that does make sense.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This is awesome, dude.
Yeah.
I've never gotten this much into it because I've just kind of soaked up what the media has, to be honest with you. So it's very nice to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So that essentially death, that like Mother Earth, the Dark Mother, essentially. You could call it that. The dark side of motherhood is dealing with death, and so my childhood was, she popped in, 2 times. Then I saw these ghostly, sort of these wormhole people, or the black shades.
Yeah.
Where light didn't touch. Yeah. So these figures, these shades that just walk about, shuffle about. Yeah, these weird dudes. And then I closed it off at like I was 10 years old and didn't touch anything on the matter. Later in my teens, though, I felt burning in my forehead, and then I just like went to doctors and nothing. Nobody knew nothing, and stumbled across chakras, and things went, in Vedas, Sergeant a little bit in Vedas, but I haven't read them all. But I learned enough then to understand what was going on. And then I started asking questions, and slowly I got answers. And then I asked my family, etc., etc. And that because I asked the right questions, I got the right answers. Because the policy, like in the whole community, is that if you don't have the right questions, you don't get the right answers. That is that we're only allowed to teach certain principles if you have the right question. Otherwise, we'll leave people alone. There's a non-dogma policy, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also like what I heard from Eastern philosophy: when the student is ready, the teacher arrives.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that. My teacher I haven't had a physical teacher, but I definitely have gone under the apprenticeship or study of certain individuals. Like I would consider myself an apprentice of Carl Jung or something of that nature for sure. And it's not for everybody, it's I think one of the sentiments are.
Yes, usually it's for open people. If you whack someone with Carl Jung and the most complex thing they have thought about is dreams, you start with the dreams, not Carl Jung.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely more complex, analysis. Carl Jung, definitely that. I've still yet to read more about Carl Jung and his method. But yeah, but I definitely, so I forgot maybe to tell you this, but I'm more of a journeyman. I'm also sort of reclaiming, reverse engineering spiritually some of the things in Norse mythos, right? There's a lot of things that are lost, and I'm just trying to find, what is true or not, and yeah.
What are some things you've discovered so far?
I've discovered the recipe for the mead that is described to be the drink of the gods. I discovered this 4 days ago. No joke.
Enlighten me. What's the brew of the gods?
Should I add the story? Would you like to know the story, how I discovered it?
Sure, have at it. And
then we go into the brew. All right. So I was listening to a famous person, Terence McKenna, and he was divulging the story, the Minoan story, about how Polyglot got recruited to a service of king because they lost. The king lost his son, and his son was I think Lukoa or something like that. His name, and Polyglot found their son dead in a honey jar, and the king tells him, hey, you're quite resourceful, and he throws him into jail and tells him, you have to revive my son. And Polyglot doesn't know how to get out of this pinch, but in his cell, there's a hole, and a snake comes, and he kills the snake. And after a while, he goes back to tearing his hair and just running in circles. And another snake comes in and sees the dead snake and goes, back into the hole. And after a while, the snake comes with a leaf and revives the other snake. So Polyglot takes, part of the leaf and asks the guards for, copious amounts of it. So he revives the boy, and after that, he's ordained as the teacher of this boy. Short story, to the point. After teaching the boy, he's allowed to go back home, and he asks the boy to spit in his mouth. And as he did, all the knowledge, magical knowledge and wisdom returned to Polyglot. No, not Polyglot, Polyideas. I'm sorry. Many ideas. Yeah. And so I heard this story, and in Norse, they talk about Kvasir being the most knowledgeable person in existence. He was born out of the spit of the gods and Vanir. So I forgot to mention this. Aesir and Vanir are two pantheons together. That's the Ausatru. But Kvasir is born of the spit of all these gods. But Kvasir is murdered by two dwarves, Fjalar and Galar, I think. And they are evil dwarves, and they have done lots of wrong things. But short story is that they make a mead out of his blood. And that's the mead of poetry, where inspiration comes and arrives. Essentially, Odin steals, the mead by shapeshifting, and on the way home, he drips some of it on Middle Earth, and then he keeps it for himself, Odin. He keeps sipping this mead. Now, the recipe is essentially magic mushrooms and fermented honey or mead, because as according to Terence McKenna, as the ecology for magic mushrooms got worse and worse, we had to store magic mushrooms in honey, and that's the recipe for essentially where the source is.
Yeah, that would make sense. Like I've heard legends of like the berserkers, but people used to take the brew of the gods before going into battle, right? Or some kind of copious potion. I'm not sure if it's the same one.
That is the red. That is red with the white dots. That's the berserker's mushroom.
Oh, I got you.
How the oral story goes is that a priest or priestess eats the mushroom, and then the berserkers or white, plain shirts. So basically, they went naked in battle. They would then drink the piss and would go into this repetition mode. So if you're on mushrooms, especially these mushrooms, you get stuck in repetition. So like if you would go into your car, you will, where are my keys? Oh, there's my keys. Then you would drop them, and then you would go, where are my keys? You would do this for 8 hours.
Yeah, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've gotten lost in a loop.
Yeah, that is definitely what happens. So that's the story that they use that in battle. There's a tremendous debate on this, in academia, which I'm not a part of. But yeah, that is a story.
I assumed that it was mushrooms. They just lost their minds, and so it was terrifying to the other people around them that were witnessing it.
Definitely. I mean, someone stuck into repetition of like, did I kill you? I don't know. And then he's like forgets, and then he just kills another one. Yeah. Wait, did I kill it? And then he just goes.
It's insane. It's crazy though.
It is definitely realm in the possibility. Was it healthy? I don't know. But there's also, so we put really, really huge status on berserkers, right? But there are written sources that heroes or warriors that kills 12 berserkers just playing smart.
Right.
So it's not like they're superhuman or something, but they're definitely scary figures. something can also be said that because the Vikings typically believe that they will go to Valhalla, Valhut,
I
when
was
they
just about to
die,
ask.
then yeah. So they believe that they will go to a good place. Then there's no reason to be, to fear, actually. And then you're better in battle because you don't have fear. You commit. Even if you're ordered to the ridiculous order, it is my place and my destiny to be in the spot I am. I chose to, go into that army. I'm gonna do my job as the best I can. If I get shot down, okay, whatever, man.
Right, right. There's a huge sense of honor to it. I think that is lost in time for Western society.
Yeah, that would be drinkskapur. To be drinkur applies both for males and female. It would just be proper person, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Honorable person.
It's all we can wish for. Like really, like I like alchemy and stuff, and so the sentiment it's a very simple sentiment, but when alchemy comes into it, it talks about this like spiritual process in a sense of like breaking oneself down and like finding union within yourself and above, and then like a lot of the principles you've shared here tonight, kind of like wrapped into a bundle of like just trying to be the best person you can be, essentially, to make an inevitable impact on the world, and that just through the path of seeking knowledge and love, you can make an impact, and not love in a cheesy sentiment either. Like, it's the profound sense, like, we'll protect what we love with a ferocity, so I think there's a lot of weight to be had around a conversation of understanding what unconditional love outweighs, when it comes to personal kind of love. It's a force that, I would consider to be like one of the pinnacles of like the magnum opus in alchemy. And I'm kind of curious now, if you've looked into alchemy at all.
A little bit. I understand the first level is the Nikrido, or the black, and then there's the red, and then there's a Philosopher's Stone. Yeah. So I have some grasp on it.
Yeah. It's just a simple process of breaking oneself down and facing yourself, essentially, to be a better person and make an impact. It's essentially, the psychological sense of looking at it.
Yeah. I think the difference, though, is that in the Norse sort of way, we don't try to ride that whole wave. We dive into it. It's more aggressive.
Right.
It's very trickster sagey,
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone gets, to swim in those waters and not drown. It's definitely one of those, sort of shake and see what, sticks.
Absolutely.
I think, and then, like there's also like a warning in the whole Norse mythos is that being too ambitious is kind of bad. If you just look at Odin when has ascended, essentially, in its oldest form in the poetry,
mm-hmm.
He is very solemn and kind of bitter about it. Like he sort of wants to forget everything.
Right.
That is essentially, like, you've seen the movie Matrix.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the guy that betrays everyone, I can't remember his name. Odin is sort of like that guy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because he wants to go back into forgetting, be part of the illusion. It's like like when he sees everything, it's like, oops, I took the wrong turn. That solemn feel is the essence of it.
Damn, I can relate to that, dude.
But essentially, like, obviously he doesn't choose to betray everyone, but he's damn, whoops.
Yeah.
There's also on top of the whole thing. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say it pays a sentiment to knowledge hurts. Knowing too much hurts.
Yeah. it's the dark path to wisdom, and part of it, part of the morality is that when in Havamot, where Odin speaks to his followers or those who are in this space, essentially, he speaks that you should always receive anyone well because he could be knocking. That these old story is that the gods could come for a visit disguised as someone else, and then you treat them well, and then they reward you because you treated them well because the god came for a visit. But in the same like a couple verses later, he tells keep your sword close because you don't know what type of guest it is.
Yeah. No, we share that sentiment here too. What I follow, like you never know who's knocking.
Yeah, praise the guest, but keep your knife close. But it illustrates the sort of this paradoxical point of views.
Well,
I think that's enough for now.
Yeah, it's getting pretty late. I'm a little tired, but this has been awesome. You shared a lot right now, and I can really appreciate it. Thank you so much, dude. We got to get back together. I want to explore more of this with you. There's just so much to unpack.
Yeah, there's so much. I don't know where to begin. Well, but the continuation of this. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Get back together, crack another cold one, talk more about it. You know? Thank you so much, Whyking. We're going to do this again.
Totally.